Let's say you're reading a rom-com novel. There are two likable leads. Let's call them Chrysanthemum and Argyle. For 3/4 of the book, you've followed them along on their journey of love and shenanigans. They have grown as characters, and they have just declared their undying love for each other. But wait, Argyle has been keeping a minor secret, and now the secret is out. Chrysanthemum is in tears and can't bring herself to ever forgive Argyle. It's a huge scene at some insert large event here. It's not what you think. More of your lies. Wait, are they actually going to break up without talking to each other? Guess they weren't as in love as they proclaimed. Yikes. Merry meet my fellow bookish witches. Welcome to Witchy Reads, a place where we talk about books and other bookish things. Today I want to talk about another trope. A trope that, while it is not the worst, does present as nails on a chalkboard when not done very well. Let's talk about third act breakups. The third act breakup is a common narrative device primarily used in romance or rom-com stories. It occurs during the third or final act of the story, where the couple that has been the central focus for the reader will experience a dramatic implosion to their relationship and cause the couple to separate, usually until the climax of the story.
Get out of here! And don't come back for 5 to 7 days.
The purpose is to throw one last major conflict or obstacle to challenge the couple's airtight relationship before the conclusion of the story. When not done well, it is by far one of the weaker narrative devices, not just in rom-coms, but overall. Often, the conflict that comes in the third act is established earlier on in the story, especially when done well. One of the love interests isn't who they say they are, but they end up falling in love anyway. One of them is keeping a secret, and it's revealed in the most inconvenient way possible. You get the idea. The breakup can be presented in a multitude of ways, such as irreconcilable differences, external forces pulling the couple apart, a heated argument, or a betrayal, etc. If done well, this turning point is meant to drive the remainder of the story until the end, when the characters are forced to confront their feelings, make some final tough decisions, come together to resolve their conflict, or ultimately to separate permanently. However, more often than not, this trope is written in such a way that the entire situation could have been avoided if the accused love interest had been forthcoming earlier in the story, or if the couple had just been willing to communicate. The main source of disdain I have for this trope is how often things could simply be talked through to a healthy resolution. But I understand that that is not suspenseful or interesting in the slightest, and so we have the third act breakup.
Am I a bet? Am I a bet?
Yes.
This trope is meant to add depth and complexity to the plot and characters, fueling character growth, a resolution, or to add further suspenseful complications. So why is it that so many stories have a hard time creating that third act breakup that gives us those things? If we have to endure this trope, why not try to make it better? Or, better yet, let's come up with something new, something different. We don't always have to have a third act breakup. One of the last rom-com novels that I read was This Spells Love by Kate Robb. This is a contemporary fantasy romance that was published in December of 2023. The story follows Gemma, a recently dumped woman in her late 20s who was hoping to be settling down at this point in her life. After this major blow to her self-esteem, she decides to chase away her sorrows with alcohol, and with the assistance of her superwoman sister, eccentric aunt, and male best friend, Dax. While deep in the margaritas, her eccentric aunt, who owns and runs a novelty shop that is clearly full of witchy trinkets, suggests that the group come together and help Gemma perform a love cleansing spell. Now, this spell would effectively erase Gemma's ex, not just from her memory, but from her history as well. This is why you should always read the fine print on spells. After performing the spell, Gemma awakes the next day to discover that the spell actually worked. But the spell didn't just remove the memory of her ex. Her life is now a completely altered reality because of the memories she does not have. Think a different dimension, a different universe if you were to choose a different life path. That is what essentially has happened to Gemma. And this is what happens when you erase someone that was an integral part of your life for the last 4 years. Do not recommend. Now she is stuck in this new reality trying to figure out a way to get back to her old life, including tracking down her best friend Dax and having him remember who she is. Because what she didn't realize in doing this spell is that Dax's memories of her are completely wrapped around her meeting her ex. And so you erase the ex, you erase her best friend Dax. As she navigates this new reality, she begins to realize that maybe what she needed was right in front of her all along. Did I mention this was a friends to lovers rom-com? Not my favorite love trope, but definitely up there. The rest of the book essentially follows Gemma going through various shenanigans and emotions as she works to gain Dax's friendship again and maybe something more. But the truth is, this isn't really her Dax. This is an alternate reality Dax. So once they do cross that friendship relationship line, Gemma is faced with a choice. Stay here with boyfriend Dax or return to her timeline where he is simply her best friend. On the one hand, her life in this new reality has improved in almost every way imaginable. She has her dream job, she is doing well, and she has Dax as the perfect boyfriend. However, the Dax in this timeline, he's not doing so great. While we don't really follow Dax's POV, we begin to learn through Gemma that his life didn't turn out the way he hoped. And in Gemma's OG timeline, it did, just minus her. It ultimately presents an interesting setup and question for the woman main character. Stay for yourself or go for the one you love. I will say, just an aside, this story gives off strong Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind mixed with 13 going on 30 vibes. So if that's your jam, this book would be perfect for you. What makes this story engaging and interesting all the way through to the end is not just the multiverse narrative, but how Rob manages to subvert that third act breakup by presenting a different conflict entirely, making the choice of doing what is best for yourself or what is best for the one you love. Gemma never tells alternate reality Dax that she is from a different timeline and that they are best friends in another universe. She doesn't need to, because that would just complicate things further. The only people who do know this are her sister and aunt, because she needs their assistance in returning to her timeline by utilizing the same love cleansing spell. So when Gemma realizes that the choice comes down to her happiness or Dax's, it's not necessarily an easy decision, but a clear one. It really doesn't need to be tangled up more by including a third act conflict with Dax, finding out about the different timelines, and disagreeing with Gemma's choice. The conflict is an internal one for one character, and I found that so profound. While this spell's love demonstrates a different approach by not really utilizing the third act breakup, I do think that the typical approach can be done well. The most common plot points that create a third act breakup are: 1, miscommunication. While not my favorite approach to this trope, I can't deny that this is the ultimate, most common one. This includes misinterpreting a conversation, written or overheard, and could revolve around a secret, an omission, or a hidden truth/identity that is ultimately revealed in the third act and causes the breakup. Usually the climax includes the ultimate forgiveness by the other love interest, and everything is resolved. Number 2, 2, external complications. This one is probably the second most common usage to get the third act breakup. This is done by showing immense pressure coming from outside the relationship, such as familial expectations, an important opportunity in a different location, aka a job offer, an interfering third party, such as an ex, or an ultimatum, the relationship versus something else. Number 3, the resurfaced past. This can include a past mistake or a long buried secret that ultimately resurfaces. This will cause trust and commitment issues and lead to the third act breakup. 4, change of heart. One or both of the characters experience growth away from their love interest. It could be for the better, self-discovery, or worse, one of them turns evil. The whole point is that they no longer share the same interests, values, or goals. This self-awareness leads to the breakup. Number 5, insecurity and jealousy. One of the characters begins to be controlled by either insecurities or jealousy and leads to irrational behavior and actions. The relationship ends to end the turmoil. 6, betrayal. This can be either real or perceived, ultimately is a breach of trust, such as infidelity or another major lie that is ultimately discovered. And 7, ambition and sacrifice. The character's dreams or life goals conflict with the relationship, and ultimately they have to either choose the relationship or choose their dream. And in choosing the dream, the breakup occurs. Using any of these plot devices should feel like a natural progression in the story, not something shoehorned in to create a faux conflict. Readers can see right through that. The key here is to make the third act breakup emotionally charged and relevant, heartbreaking or transformative, and resonant to the overall plot and characters in the story. The other recent rom-com I read was Kiss Her Once for Me by Allison Cochran. It is a contemporary queer Christmas romance that was published back in November of 2022. This story follows Portland, Oregon transplant Ellie Oliver. She recently moved to Portland to pursue her dream career in animation by working at Laika Studios. Side note, if you aren't aware of Laika Studios, it actually is an animation studio that does exist in Portland, Oregon, and they create some wonderful stop motion films, the most popular being Coraline. Side note, my cousin used to work there, and I actually got to tour the set. It was during the production of Kubo and the Two Strings. It was beautiful. Anyway, back to Kiss Her Once for Me and the character of Ellie. On Christmas Eve, she has a meet cute with a woman named Jack in Portland's famous bookstore, Powell's Books. And I am still not okay that I have never experienced a bookstore meet cute. Now, this chance meeting turns into a whirlwind one-night stand romance that ends in betrayal and heartbreak. 1 year later, Ellie finds herself fired from her job in animation and now working in a coffee shop. Very Portland. On the verge of losing her apartment and having to move back in with her very unloving mother, she is presented with a proposition from the landlord of the coffee shop she works at. His name is Andrew. Andrew would like Ellie to agree to a fake marriage so that he can receive an inheritance from his recently deceased grandfather. Ellie balks at this initially, but after spending some time with Andrew, along with many alcoholic beverages, and an agreement to receive $200K of said inheritance, she eventually agrees. But before they can walk down the aisle, Ellie and Andrew must spend Christmas with his family as a legitimate couple. Shenanigans ensue when they arrive at the family cabin to find Andrew's sister, Jacqueline, aka Jack, already there. Ellie's mysterious one-night stand and heartbreaker. We also get to meet Jack's best friend, Dylan, who happens to have a sexual history with Andrew. It's a whole mess, but a fun mess. The rest of the story is a lot of back and forth between the four main people. Andrew and Ellie arguing about keeping their fake relationship a secret, Ellie and Jack having a mature conversation about what happened the year before, and Andrew and Dylan figuring out what they are to each other while simultaneously failing at keeping their hands off of each other. Of course, how these stories go, things progress to the point where Ellie has taken too long to come clean to Jack about the entire arrangement with Andrew. So of course, the reveal of the fake relationship is what causes the third act breakup. This entire situation is also exacerbated by the fact that Ellie has been writing a webcomic detailing what happened last year with Jack, as well as the arrangement with Andrew this year. Now, a few things are happening here. Definitely miscommunication, lies, and betrayal. It's a lot for any one person to handle, and Jack reacting by immediately removing Ellie from her life is somewhat justified. It should also be noted that at the point of the third act breakup, they weren't really in any kind of official relationship yet, and I do think that helps here. Once you're fully committed, it's harder to justify up and walking out of the relationship without some serious discussion first. But I will say, a deep, mature conversation would definitely have cleared up things a lot quicker than the remaining 6 chapters of this book. But I understand that Jack is supposed to represent the very human nature of us as the reader and is rightfully pissed in this situation. She's been lied to by the woman she thought she knew and loved, and by her brother, whom she is very close to. While the third act breakup in Kiss Her Once for Me is still a pretty common one, I would say that it is done well. The entire build up to the breakup was happening for a majority of the book. We, the readers, were just waiting for the other shoe to drop. There are genuine human emotions at play here that work to progress the characters forward in the narrative, and I appreciate that. I also like the fact that the characters who are guilty of the mistakes own it and don't try too hard to justify their actions. Mistakes were made, and at that point, the only weapon you really have in your arsenal is to just say sorry. It is a very human interaction between all of the characters, and I was not disappointed by it. I also believe it was done well enough for the eventual resolution between the characters to be rightfully earned. It doesn't just happen. Steps are taken. Character growth is made. The point in all of this is that if a story utilizes the third act breakup, it can either make or break the story and its characters. It can be the difference between a good story, an okay story, or a bad story. Personally, I think the third act breakup is handled pretty well in Kiss Her Once for Me. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but the tension has been building as to when everyone will discover the fake relationship. Ellie and Jack have finally come together in some kind of way and mended what was broken the year before. The emotions run high when everything is revealed. Ellie ends up changing for the better, though it does feel like the majority of that change only takes place in the third act and not gradually throughout the book, which I would have preferred for the character. Of course, as we near the climax, the emotions temper down and the reunion/resolution happens between all of the characters. It was very cut and dry and by the books, which makes this a nice, predictable comfort rom-com/romance for readers. But even with all of that, I would have preferred something new. Sure, all the story elements were there, and it was executed as well as would be expected. But after all this time, I think it's okay to say that we can do something other than the third act breakup. I think it's okay to want something more from our stories. Aside from the common plot beat pacing and maybe some sadistic authors who take joy from making readers cry, what does continuing making the third act breakup the common choice? We've grown as readers, and I think that there are better ways to test a relationship. Because in the end, that's all the third act breakup is. A test to see if the relationship we hope will be long-lasting can get through this first hurdle, as it were. I also like the idea of finding alternatives to this trope because ultimately they come off as healthier representations of relationships. You can test the relationship, have that tension, just minus the breakup and get back together tomfoolery. This is why I ultimately enjoyed this spell's love a little bit more than Kiss Her Once for me. The tension not only remains in the story, but builds with Gemma needing to make a final decision about what timeline to stay in permanently by a specific deadline. She is tested by deciding what would ultimately be better for her and for Dax. And I think by choosing to return her to her original timeline proves that she loves Dax more so than any shoehorned in conflict. But I guess if you were wanting to get technical, they did break up as she returns to the timeline where they aren't together anymore. They are just best friends. So she'll have to convince him to be more than friends if she wants the relationship to progress to what it was in the new timeline. Thank goodness for us, those feelings are well and truly established at the beginning of the book. So it literally just takes one grown-up conversation and they are together in the original timeline. This spell's love flipped the script just enough to keep it comforting and unique. I rated This Spell's Love by Kate Robb 5 out of 5 stars. In addition to the original third act conflict, I thought the story was very well done in its pacing, world building, and characters. Plus, I really just liked the witchy spell aspect of the story. I enjoyed that there were characters outside the main couple that we got to really know and love and explore, namely Gemma's sister and aunt. I loved both of those characters, and I loved the character growth within those characters that then helped propel Gemma's character to grow. It made the exchanges between those characters in both timelines heartwarming and realistic to the situation. I also thought that the love progressed in a natural way and was a sweet friends to lovers story. There is a dash of smut in this book, so just be aware of that. I personally thought it was well placed into the story and wasn't overdone. I rated Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochran 3.5 stars out of 5. While I do think it had a strong third act breakup compared to a lot of others in the genre, it was still a common narrative device, and I just didn't feel the tension with those scenes the way other readers might. I also think we didn't get a chance to know the fun side characters outside the main couple. This wasn't a horrible decision, as the focus of the story is on the main couple, but since the brother Andrew was technically more involved in the love triangle aspect, I would have wanted more interaction between him and Ellie. All I know is if I was Andrew's family, I would not have bought them as a couple from the second they walked through the door. They barely spoke to each other and spent almost zero time together on that family trip. Who did they think that they were fooling? I also think the world building could have used a little bit more work. Granted, this is a contemporary fiction, so when I say world building, I wanted to feel like I was in a specific place and time, and it didn't feel that way to me. It just felt like, hey, we're in a cabin. Hey, we're in a city. The only reason why I even got a little bit of the nostalgia feeling of the locations is simply because I know the city of Portland, Oregon. I have visited many times. I have family who live there, and I personally love that city. Other than that, if you aren't someone who knows Portland, Oregon well, I can see this not being something that really triggers anything for you as far as the location of the story. Also, from Ellie's job in animation to her job in the coffee shop, her apartment, her mother, it all just felt like it was heavily underutilized. I should have felt more for this character, and frankly, I just didn't. I will say I did like Ellie and Jack as a couple though. So what do you think of the third act breakup? Should writers start coming up with different ways to add tension to their romance stories without using the this trope? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'm really curious. If you're enjoying my videos and would like to support my channel, the best way to do that right now is to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and share any videos that you particularly like. It really is a huge help and I greatly appreciate it. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.